Detective Blackwood sees a courtroom and thinks it still bends to his will. Another case to rig. Another truth to bury. But what he doesn't know, Judge Hayes isn't just wearing the robe, she's carrying years of evidence that can rip his empire apart. Stick around. Because when the footage plays and Hat Blackwood lies erupts, his badge won't protect him. It'll brand him. Justice isn't coming quietly. It's coming like a storm. And hey, tell us where you're watching from and what time. Drop it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. Detective Marcus Blackwood gripped his leather-bound case file tighter, savoring the familiar scent of power as he strode into courtroom 7. His polished badge caught the morning light streaming through the high windows, a gleaming reminder of his 23 years commanding respect in these halls. Today would be no different. Just another case to close, another victory to add to his impeccable record. The hushed whispers of the gallery fell silent as Detective Marcus Blackwood approached the witness stand, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. His thin smile didn't waver as he caught Judge Hayes' gaze. She might wear the robe, but he owned this courtroom, had owned it for decades through carefully crafted testimony that had sent hundreds behind bars. "Your Honor," Detective Marcus Blackwood began, voice dripping with practiced authority, "I can confirm without doubt that the defendant, James Anderson, was observed at the scene." The lie rolled off his tongue smooth as honey. What was one more false testimony when it served the greater good? When it maintained order? A movement caught his eye. Someone in the gallery raising their phone, recording. Detective Marcus Blackwood's jaw tightened imperceptibly. These new watchdogs with their cameras, thinking they could challenge the natural order. His fingers brushed his badge, drawing strength from its familiar weight. "And you're certain about the time of observation?" Judge Hayes's question carried an unusual edge that made Detective Marcus Blackwood's neck prickle. Something was off about her tone, her posture. She'd never questioned his testimony so directly before. "Absolutely certain, Your Honor." Detective Marcus Blackwood's voice boomed with conviction, drowning out the small voice of doubt in his mind. "My report clearly states—" "Your report," Judge Hayes interrupted, "appears to conflict with surveillance footage submitted this morning." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Detective Marcus Blackwood's pulse quickened as phones rose higher, more cameras capturing his face. Blackwood lies flashed across a screen in the front row. His badge felt suddenly cold against his chest. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He'd built his reputation methodically, testimony by testimony, conviction by conviction. One case couldn't unravel decades of careful work. Could it? "I've protected this city my way for 23 years. These people don't understand what it takes to maintain order. One man's freedom is worth sacrificing for the greater good. But why are my hands trembling? Why does Judge Hayes's gaze feel like it's stripping away my armor?" Type "truth if you believe justice is coming" popped up on one of the live streams, comments flooding in by the hundreds. Detective Marcus Blackwood squared his shoulders, fighting the unfamiliar sensation of vulnerability. But as Judge Hayes leaned forward, he caught something in her expression that sent a chill down his spine. Recognition. Not of his authority, but of something deeper, darker. Something he'd buried under years of justified lies and calculated testimony. Would his carefully constructed world survive the next 24 hours? The answer hung in the air like a sword about to fall, as Detective Marcus Blackwood faced the first real challenge to his power in over 2 decades. The truth was coming. And for the first time in his distinguished career, Detective Marcus Blackwood wasn't sure he could control it. Officer James Anderson stared at the courtroom's polished floor, watching his reflection fragment in the afternoon light. 20 years of enforcing Hammond's unwritten rules had trained him to spot weakness, to maintain order. But seeing Judge Hayes, on that bench, made his carefully constructed world splinter like the light on marble. The weight of his badge pressed against his chest as whispers rippled through the gallery. Each face struck him with memories. Eleanor's father's plantation house, their secret meetings behind the old magnolia tree, his own father's proud smile when he joined the force instead of pursuing law school. "Keep our streets safe, son," his father had said. The real meaning hung unspoken. Keep things as they've always been. A legal pad before him displayed the damning statistics his supervisor had warned him about. Complaints of excessive force, disproportionate arrests, all carefully addressed through internal reviews. Dr. Marcus Reynolds's study on systemic bias in Hammond's police force lay buried in his desk drawer, its conclusions too dangerous to acknowledge. The department's patterns suggest institutional perpetuation of historical inequities, the report had stated. James had made sure it never reached the public. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his collar, remembering Captain Richard's words from that morning. "Handle this right, Anderson. We've got 20 years of procedure backing you." Procedure. The word tasted bitter now. Every procedure had been another brick in a wall between justice and truth. The prosecution's evidence felt like photographs from another life. Grainy body cam footage, witness statements, arrest records. Each document traced a path from that first choice, joining the force instead of law school, to this moment. His mentor, Sergeant Thompson, had shaped him well. "It's not about right or wrong, son. It's about maintaining order." A young officer's testimony pierced his practiced calm. "Officer Anderson told me this was how things worked in Hammond." The words echoed against the courtroom's wooden panels, each repetition an indictment. James felt the weight of decades of how things worked pressing down on his shoulders. His fingers brushed against his badge, its surface no longer gleaming but dulled by years of compromise. An inner voice, long suppressed, whispered, "What happened to that boy who wanted to defend the innocent?" The question burned like acid through layers of justification. Social media notifications buzzed in his pocket. #Hammond. Justice was gaining traction. Someone had compiled a thread of his past cases, connecting dots he'd spent years keeping separate. His carefully maintained image was unraveling tweet by tweet. "The department stands by Officer Anderson's record," Captain Richards had declared to reporters that morning. But standing there now, James could see the captain's subtle step backward, the beginning of distance. 20 years of loyalty meant nothing against the tide of exposed truth. Eleanor's, Judge Hayes's, gaze held no hatred, only a deep, cutting disappointment that stripped away his defenses. Each tap of her gavel transported him back to their childhood discussions of justice and dreams. He'd chosen power over principles, security over truth, and the cost of that choice was finally coming due. The afternoon sun caught his badge again, and for a moment James saw himself through Eleanor's eyes. Not the respected officer he'd pretended to be, but the enforcer of an unjust system he'd once sworn to change. His hand moved to his chest, fingers tracing the edges of his badge. No longer a symbol of pride, but a weight of accountability. Type, badge of shame. If you've ever witnessed someone choose power over principles. They called for a recess, But James remained seated, drowning in the evidence of his willing participation in Hammond's machinery of injustice. The true crime wasn't in any single act. It was in the 1,000 small choices that had turned him from a dreamer of justice into its obstacle. As shadows lengthened across the courtroom floor, James Anderson faced the truth he'd spent 20 years avoiding. He hadn't maintained order. He'd preserved inequality. And now, under the steady gaze of the friend he'd betrayed and the law he'd twisted, his carefully constructed fortress of justifications was crumbling into dust. James Anderson strides through the marble courthouse halls, his polished shoes clicking against the floor with measured precision. The afternoon light, streaming through tall windows, casts his shadow long and dark, like a king surveying his domain. 20 years of manipulating the system have taught him how to wear power like a second skin. Each document he files, each minor charge he presses, adds another brick to his fortress of influence. The protesters' chants from outside pierce his usual calm. Their voices carry accusations he's long dismissed, but today they needle under his skin like thorns. His hand trembles slightly as he adjusts his tie clip, a golden scales of justice pin that's become his trademark in the Louisiana legal circles. "Sir, the media's requesting comment about the bias allegations," his assistant whispers, smartphone screen glowing with notifications. James Anderson waves her away, but his eyes catch the trending hashtag, #AndersonJustice. The video clips spreading across social media show a pattern he's tried to hide. The harsher sentences, the denied appeals, all targeting specific communities. His carefully constructed narrative is unraveling thread by thread. Defense Attorney Porter's latest motion sits heavy in his hands. The statistical analysis reveals what James Anderson has always known but never acknowledged. The systemic discrimination flowing through his cases like poison in a river. Each page of evidence feels like a personal indictment, forcing him to confront the ugly truth behind his tough-on-crime reputation. His phone buzzes again. The Bar Association wants an emergency meeting. Colleagues who once laughed at his jokes are suddenly unavailable. The whispers in the courthouse corridors have changed from respect to suspicion. James Anderson's kingdom is crumbling, and he knows it. Standing before the window in his private office, he watches protesters below holding signs with his face crossed out. The same faces he's dismissed for years now look up at him with judgment in their eyes. His reflection in the glass overlaps their angry expressions, and for a moment he sees himself as they do, not a pillar of justice, but its corrupted shadow. His scales of justice pin catches the light, and he remembers the day he received it at his swearing-in. "Justice is blind," he'd proclaimed proudly. Now the words taste like ash in his mouth. Each tick of the courthouse clock sounds like a countdown to his inevitable fall. Type 2 in the comments if you've ever watched someone powerful realize they're not untouchable. James Anderson's hands shake as he opens his case files, decades of decisions spreading before him like a map of destruction. Each ruling, each life affected, each family torn apart, all bearing his signature, his stamp of authority. The system he's exploited for so long is turning its gaze upon its faithful servant, and he finds himself wanting. The sun dips lower, casting prison bar shadows across his desk. In the gathering darkness, James Anderson finally faces the weight of his choices, the burden of power misused. The chants outside grow louder, and this time he can't shut them out. His empire of injustice trembles on its foundation, and he knows the fall will be spectacular. A hushed tension settles over the courtroom as Judge Eleanor Hayes takes her place behind the bench, the weight of her gavel feeling heavier than ever before. The familiar faces she's known since childhood, blur into an accusing sea as she faces James Anderson, her oldest friend, now a defendant before her. The polished wood of her judge's chair offers no comfort tonight, as the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her carefully maintained composure. Eleanor's fingers trace the delicate scales pin on her robe, a symbol she once wore with unshakable pride. Now it seems to burn against her chest as Attorney Porter systematically dismantles the prosecution's case. Each precisely aimed question hits like a physical blow, forcing her to confront ugly truths she's spent years avoiding. "Officer Harris," Porter's voice cuts through the stillness. "Please explain why your dash cam was conveniently turned off during the initial stop." Eleanor watches Officer Harris squirm, his discomfort mirroring her own rising unease. She's signed countless warrants for him, trusted his testimony in hundreds of cases. But now, as security footage plays on the courtroom screens, she sees what she refused to acknowledge before: the unmistakable pattern of racial profiling, the casual abuse of power, the system she's helped perpetuate. Her hand trembles slightly as she makes notes, the scratch of her pen against paper sounding unnaturally loud in the hushed courtroom. Each stroke feels like a confession, an admission of her own complicity. The gallery's collective gasp at particularly damning evidence makes her flinch, but she forces herself to watch, to really see. "Your Honor," the prosecutor begins, but Eleanor raises her hand, silencing him. For the first time in her career, she begins questioning the evidence standards herself, methodically exposing the flaws in the system she once defended so fiercely. Her voice grows stronger with each question, even as her carefully constructed worldview crumbles. Social media explodes. Justice, on trial trends within hours as clips of her detailed interrogation go viral. Her phone buzzes incessantly with notifications, but she ignores them all, focused solely on the truth emerging before her. "The court will take a brief recess," she announces, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. In her chambers, Eleanor stands before the mirror, the scales pin glinting under the harsh light. With trembling fingers, she removes it, placing it carefully on her desk. Some symbols, she realizes, must be earned anew. When she returns to the courtroom, her steps are purposeful, her resolve hardened. James Anderson's eyes meet hers, and in them she sees not just their shared past, but the future she must help build, one where justice truly means justice for all. "Drop a 3 if you believe true justice demands courage to change," scrolls across screens as millions watch her transformation from guardian of the system to its conscious critic. The evening session stretches into night, but Eleanor Hayes sits straight-backed and unwavering, determined to ensure that this time, in this case, justice will truly be blind. Her gavel rings out like thunder in the hushed courtroom, each strike echoing with the weight of change. The sun slants through the courtroom windows, its dying rays catching the polished wood and brass as Judge Eleanor Hayes stands alone, her judicial robes heavy on her shoulders. For 20 years, she has worn these robes like armor, believing they protected the sanctity of justice. Now, as the weight of her not guilty verdict still hangs in the air, she sees them differently, as a disguise she can no longer maintain. Her fingers trace the scales of justice pin on her lapel, the metal cold against her skin. The same pin that has marked her authority for 2 decades now feels like a brand of shame. In the empty courtroom, Eleanor replays James Anderson's face as she reads the verdict. Not the triumph she expected to see, but a deep sadness that mirrored her own growing realization. Did you really think a clean verdict would wash away 20 years of complicity? She whispers to herself, her words echoing in the vacant chamber. The evening light casts long shadows across her desk, where case files tell stories of countless others who stood where James stood today. Stories she had processed through the sterile lens of procedure rather than humanity. Rising from her chair, Eleanor approaches the window. Below, news vans cluster like vultures, their satellite dishes reaching toward the darkening sky. CNN's headline scrolls across her phone. Controversial verdict raises questions about judicial oversight. The hashtag Hayes Justice trends nationwide, but not for the reasons she once would have wanted. In her private chambers, Eleanor removes her robe with trembling fingers. For the first time, she sees it clearly, not as a symbol of justice achieved, but as a reminder of justice denied. The scale's pin catches the last light of day, throwing shadows that look like prison bars across her desk. "All those years," she murmurs, "I thought impartiality meant turning a blind eye to the bigger picture. How many lives did my willful blindness affect?" Her computer screen glows with dozens of unread emails, colleagues, critics, supporters. But one subject line catches her eye. Judicial Reform Coalition meeting, tomorrow. Eleanor reaches for her legal pad, her handwriting urgent and clear as she begins drafting her proposal for systematic change. The words flow faster than she can write. Mandatory bias training, community oversight panels, transparent review processes. Each point addresses a crack in the system she had helped maintain. Each solution a step toward redemption. The clock strikes midnight as Eleanor finally sets down her pen. Her chambers, once a sanctuary of ordered justice, now feel like a confession booth. She unpins the scales of justice from her robe, holding them up to the moonlight. Tomorrow, this pin will sit in a display case in the courthouse museum, not as a symbol of authority, but as a reminder that true justice requires constant evolution and courage. Type "Change starts now" if you believe in the power of transformation, she whispers to the empty room, imagining the thousands who will hear her story. Share this moment if you know that real justice demands more than just following rules. It demands the bravery to break them when they no longer serve truth. The night deepens around Judge Eleanor Hayes as she finalizes her reform proposal. The same courthouse that witnessed her greatest professional triumph now bears witness to her most profound personal truth, that justice is not a destination, but a journey, and every judge must choose whether to be a guardian of the system or a catalyst for its transformation.